The dead man was seen walking in the storm an hour after the sea had already taken him. This is the Unwritten Murder Files. The following story is a work of fiction. All characters and events are fictitious, and any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. By the time Ione Mercer saw Gannet's End again, the sea had erased half the road. Rain moved sideways across the windscreen of the hired car. Beyond the wipers, the coast appeared in broken pieces. A white rail, a black field, a burst of foam against stone. The village clung to the cliffs in rows of slate roofs and narrow chimneys, every window turned inland as if the houses had learned not to look directly at the Atlantic. At the farthest point of the headland stood Northlight House. It had once been a signal station, then a convalescent home, then a hotel for people who enjoyed paying to be frightened by weather. Its main building crouched behind a curved seawall. A glass gallery joined it to an old lantern tower at the cliff edge. During calm evenings, guests drank champagne there and watched the sunset turn the water copper. Tonight, the gallery shone against the dark like a single illuminated bone. Ione slowed at the iron gates. A man in a yellow slicker stepped into the road and raised one gloved hand. Even under the hood, she recognized the broad face and pale eyebrows of Bastian Cray, harbor master of Gannet's End, and, 20 years ago, the boy who had taught her how to tie a bowline. He leaned toward her open window. Road closes in 10 minutes. Good evening to you, too. His expression changed by less than an inch. Ione Mercer. Still observant. Still arriving when sensible people are leaving. A gust slapped rain through the window. Ione raised it again and called through the glass, Leander invited me. Bastian looked toward the hotel. Leander invites storms. Doesn't mean they should come. He moved the barrier aside. Northlight House had invited Ione for the anniversary weekend because she produced a successful audio series about vanished coastal communities. Leander Fane, owner of the hotel and chairman of the Gannet's End Renewal Trust, wanted a polished recording about the village's resilience. His email had used the word resilience 5 times and responsibility not once. Ione had accepted because she needed work. She had also accepted because Gannet's End was where her mother still lived, where her father had died under a stain no inquest had washed away, and where Ione had spent 2 decades pretending she had no questions left. Inside the hotel, the storm vanished behind thick walls and expensive silence. Brass lamps glowed over dark timber. The air smelled of beeswax, damp wool, and a fire fed too generously. Portraits of lifeboat crews lined the hall, including one from the year Ione left. Her father was absent from it. A woman in a charcoal suit hurried across the tiled floor. She was small, straight-backed, and composed in the way of people who considered composure a form of first aid. Ione Mercer. Thank heaven. Tressa Lorne, hotel manager. She took Ione's wet coat before Ione could object. Your room is ready, though I should warn you that the East Wing has lost power twice. The memorial dinner begins at 7. Mr. Fane wants your recording equipment in the ballroom by 6:30. Does Mr. Fane always schedule weather? Only when it can be invoiced. The answer was dry enough to make Ione smile. Tressa did not. She handed Ione a brass key and lowered her voice. One other thing. The guests are not getting on. How many guests? 6, not counting you. Each believes the weekend is about something different. Mr. Fane has encouraged that belief. Why? Tressa glanced at the closed doors of the ballroom. Because he enjoys entering a room after everyone has chosen a side. The doors opened before Ione could ask more. Leander Fane filled the doorway without being a large man. He was 62, silver-haired, narrow-shouldered, and dressed in a dark suit that seemed cut to make stillness look commanding. A polished black cane rested in his left hand. He had injured his right side in a sailing accident the previous winter. In photographs, the cane had become part of his image. Leander Fane, gentleman of the cliffs, leaning on Blackthorn while the sea raged behind him. Ione, he said warmly, you made it. You sound surprised. I've learned not to trust roads, forecasts, or journalists. Yet you invited all 3. His smile widened. Exactly why you're here. He kissed the air beside her cheek and looked past her to the front doors. Tressa, has Counselor Kestrel arrived? 10 minutes ago. And Kit? Filming in the lantern gallery, despite being told not to. Leander sighed with theatrical patience. Family. He guided Ione into the ballroom. The room had been arranged for 30. but only 9 chairs stood around the long table. Beyond tall windows, rain blurred the lights of the lower harbor. On a temporary stage waited Ione's microphones, a lectern, and a brass ship's bell, polished bright enough to reflect the chandeliers. 6 people occupied the room, none of them speaking to one another. Celestine Fane stood near the windows with a glass of water. She was Leander's estranged wife, a marine geologist, known for opposing developments on unstable coastlines, including her husband's planned expansion of Northlight House. Her white hair was cut bluntly at the jaw, a thin scar crossed one eyebrow. When Leander entered, she looked at him as she might have looked at a crack in a seawall, with professional concern and no affection. Bastian Cray had come in through a side door, leaving wet footprints on the floor. He avoided Ione's eyes now. Oris Flint, a salvage diver, sat with both hands around a coffee cup. He was lean, restless, and younger than his sun-cut face suggested. A healing bruise darkened his chin. Kit Vale, Leander's nephew, moved along the glass gallery beyond the ballroom with a camera braced against his shoulder. He was 30, handsome in an unfinished way, and famous online for documentaries that treated other people's secrets as scenery. Sabine Kestrel stood beside the stage. At 47, she had served 3 terms on the village council and 1 decade before that in coastal rescue. She wore a navy dress, sensible black boots, and a small silver pin shaped like a tern. Her dark hair was threaded with gray. Ione remembered her as the young rescue swimmer who could carry a child through surf while shouting at adults to get out of the way. Sabine's gaze met Ione's. For a moment, something softer appeared. "Your mother said you might come," she said. "I thought I'd surprise everyone." In Gannet's End, surprise is usually just old trouble arriving in a new coat. The 6th guest was Dr. Karis Knoll, the village physician. She stood apart from the others, turning an unopened envelope between her fingers. Leander had funded the small clinic on the harbor road. According to local gossip, he reminded Karis of that fact whenever she disagreed with him. Leander tapped his cane against the floor. "Friends," he said, "before dinner, a little clarity. The storm has closed the road and the harbor is under restriction. We are, for better or worse, together until morning." "No one here is your friend," Celestine said. Leander looked pleased. "Then honesty should be easier." Tressa entered carrying a tray of drinks. Her hands were steady, but the glasses trembled faintly against one another. Leander continued. "Tomorrow, representatives from the National Coastal Commission were due to arrive. The weather has delayed them, not canceled them. I intend to present a new plan for Gannet's End. Reinforced cliffs, an expanded hotel, a modernized harbor, and a heritage center in the lower village." Bastian gave a short laugh. "You mean private berths, luxury suites, and a museum built over working sheds?" "I mean survival." "You always do," Sabine said. Leander's eyes moved to her. "And you, of all people, know the cost of it." A stillness passed through the room. Ione heard it the way she heard a bad edit, a silence with something cut out of the middle. Leander lifted a leather document case from the table. "I also intend to correct several misunderstandings about the Renewal Trust's finances." Sabine's face did not change, but her hand closed around the turn pin. Tressa set down the tray too quickly. One glass tipped, spilling wine across the cloth. Leander watched the red stain spread. "Careful." "I'll replace it," Tressa said. "You always do." Kit lowered his camera. "Is this the part where you announce you're dying and leave us all a puzzle?" "No," Leander said. "This is the part where I announce I'm selling Northlight House." Tressa went white. Celestine put down her water. Oris looked toward the door. Leander smiled at their reactions. "The buyer will retain the historic facade. The staff will receive the protections required by law. My family will be provided for according to my wishes." "Your wishes," Kit said, "being the only weather system you respect." Leander turned to Ione. "Record all of this if you like. By tomorrow, every person in this room will have reason to tell the truth." Dinner was delayed by a power failure in the kitchen. At 6:45, spelled aloud by Tressa for the benefit of the staff radio, the lights dimmed and returned. Wind pressed against the windows. Somewhere in the old building, a door slammed hard enough to shake the glasses. Ione tested her microphones while the others scattered through the hotel. Celestine went to the map room with a folder of geological surveys. Bastian took a call from the harbor office. Oris disappeared toward the service corridor. Kit resumed filming. Karis entered the library and shut the door. Sabine remained at the table, reading messages on her phone. Tressa moved between all of them, smoothing a crisis that seemed to multiply each time she touched it. Leander came to the stage. "You've already noticed," he said. "Noticed what?" "That each of them wants something from me. People usually do when you invite them to a hotel and threaten their futures before dinner." He leaned on his cane. "Your father used to speak like that." The room narrowed around her. "My father isn't part of your recording." "He should be. Gannet's End has misunderstood him for 20 years. You helped it misunderstand." Leander's expression lost its warmth. "I helped this village survive the Morrow Bay sinking. My father was blamed for a navigation failure," he reported 3 times, "before the boat left harbor. You were 16. Grief edits memory. I have his letters." "Then perhaps we should compare archives." He tapped the leather case. "I found something this week. A copy of the maintenance report. The original, not the version submitted to the inquiry." Ione stared at him. "Where?" "Safe enough." "What does it say?" "That depends on whether we make an arrangement." There it was, the reason for the invitation. Leander did not want a journalist. He wanted a microphone he could own. Ione switched off the recorder on the stage. No arrangement. "Listen before performing integrity. You produce a fair account of the renewal trust. I release the report. Your father's name is reconsidered. You could release it now." "I could. But then you couldn't use it." His smile returned, smaller and colder. "You are your father's daughter. And you are exactly what he said you were." She walked away before he could ask what that meant. At 7:20, the rain intensified. Ione found her mother on the telephone in a small sitting room and promised she was safe. When she returned to the main hall, raised voices came from the map room. Celestine stood over a table covered with cliff surveys. Leander faced her, his cane hooked over one arm. "You buried the bore results," Celestine said. "The eastern foundation is moving. Millimeters. Enough to make the lantern wing unsafe in a major surge. Then we reinforce it. With public money you've already promised to the lower harbor." Leander saw Ione in the doorway. Private conversation. Celestine did not turn. "Tell her. You're paying her to create the record, aren't you?" "I am paying her to report accurately. That would be a first for someone in this building." Leander lifted the leather case from a chair and left. Celestine watched him go. He keeps evidence the way other men keep wine. Not to use, to possess. "What is in the case?" Ione asked. "Enough to ruin at least 3 people here." "Are you one?" Celestine folded the survey. "I stopped being ruinable when I left him." At 7:40, Ione heard Bastian and Leander arguing in the covered passage leading to the old chart room. "You signed the inspection," Bastian said. "So did your brother." "My brother was 19. He was an officer on the vessel. He was a deckhand who trusted men with money." Leander noticed Ione and lowered his voice. Bastian did not. "You bought the inquiry," Bastian said. "Then you bought the harbor. One day you'll find something you can't put your name on." Leander stepped closer. "The harbor remains open because I put my name on it." Bastian's fists tightened. Ione moved between them before she had decided to. "Save it for the microphones," she said. Bastian looked at her, then at Leander. "Ask him what he did with the original maintenance report." Leander walked away. Bastian's anger drained as quickly as it had come, leaving exhaustion behind. "You knew about the report?" Ione asked. "I knew it existed." "And my father?" Bastian looked toward the windows. "Your father tried to stop the boat sailing." "Why didn't you say that at the inquiry?" "Because Leander had proof my brother had been drinking." "Was he?" "1 beer, maybe 2. Enough to make the truth useless." Outside, the storm siren sounded from the harbor, one long blast for dangerous surge. At 8, Tressa rang a handbell and announced that dinner would be served late but hot. No one came immediately. Ione went looking for Leander. She found Kit in the lantern gallery, filming the storm through the glass. His camera light painted his face ghostly white. "Have you seen your uncle?" she asked. "Not since he threatened to cut me out of the will." "Did he?" He implied it with enough detail to count. Kit turned the camera toward her. "Say something about coming home." She pushed the lens aside. "Turn that off." "He did, surprisingly." "He invited you because of the report," Kit said. "How do you know?" "I copy his files." "That sounds illegal." "It sounds like family." "Where is the report?" "I don't know. He moved it. He moved a lot of things this week." A crash echoed from below the gallery. They both turned. The sound had come from the service side of the hotel, followed by the rattle of metal and a curse. Oris Flint emerged from a side door carrying a coil of rope. "Loose shutter," he called. "Tressa asked me to secure it." His shirt sleeve was wet to the elbow. Something dark marked the cuff. Kit lifted the camera again. Oris swore and covered the lens with one hand. "Film me again and I'll drop that thing in the tide." At 8:12, the hotel lights failed completely. Darkness struck the building in a single blow. Someone screamed in the ballroom. Glass broke. The emergency lamps came on one by one, dim amber circles along the walls. Ione heard Tressa calling for everyone to remain where they were. Wind moaned through the old ventilation shafts. From somewhere beneath the floor came 3 heavy knocks. Then silence. When the main generator started, they gathered in the ballroom. Celestine arrived from the map room. Bastion came through the harbor door. Karis emerged from the library with the envelope still in her hand. Oris entered from the service passage. Kit had never left Ione's sight. Sabine was already seated at the table, breathing hard as if she had run. Tressa counted them twice. "Mr. Fane is missing," she said. Sabine looked at the clock above the fireplace, then corrected herself aloud for Ione's recorder. "It is 8:17. No one spoke. Tressa sent staff to search the guest rooms and kitchens. Bastion checked the exterior doors. Ione and Kit took the gallery. Caris went to Leander's suite. Celestine stood in the middle of the ballroom and said, very quietly, "He has the case." "What case?" Caris asked. Celestine did not answer. At 8:25, a figure appeared at the far end of the lantern gallery. The gallery was 40 yards of glass and iron suspended above the service courtyard. Rain streamed over the panes. Light from the tower behind the figure reduced him to shape and color: a dark hat, a black cane, and Leander Fane's unmistakable red oilskin. "There," Tressa said. Relief broke through her voice. "Mr. Fane." They all saw him. The figure crossed from the tower toward the main hotel, slow against the wind. The cane struck the floor. He lifted his right arm once, a brief wave toward the ballroom windows. Kit raised his camera, but the lens fogged from the temperature change. By the time he wiped it, the figure had passed behind the stone arch at the near end of the gallery. Tressa hurried to meet him. No one came through the door. She opened it. The passage beyond was empty. "Service stair," Bastion said. They searched the stair, the adjacent rooms, and the lower corridor. There was no sign of Leander. Ione returned to the gallery. On the iron floor near the tower end lay a wet print from a narrow boot. At 8:40, the hotel's old internal telephone rang in the ballroom. Tressa answered. Her face changed. "Say that again." She lowered the receiver. One of the kitchen staff found Mr. Fane's cane beside the door to Sablecut. Bastion swore. Sablecut was a tidal chamber beneath Northlight House, carved into the cliff when the building had been a signal station. At low water, workers once used it to land supplies from small boats. At high water, the sea filled the chamber and struck the stone roof with enough force to shake the hotel. The tide was rising. Bastion took a torch and ordered everyone else to remain inside. Ione followed him. So did Caris. Oris appeared behind them with a second light and said he knew the lower passage better than anyone. The stairs descended through older versions of the building. Carpet became boards, boards became stone. The air cooled. Water ticked somewhere in the dark. At the bottom, they found Leander's blackthorn cane lying across the threshold. The door to Sablecut stood open. Bastion shone his torch inside. Leander Fane lay on the sloping stone where the first black fingers of the tide reached him. His red oilskin was gone. He wore his dinner suit, one shoe missing. The iron smell beneath the salt made Ione's mouth fill with metal. One hand rested palm up in the shallow water, moving slightly each time the sea breathed into the chamber. Caris knelt beside him, checked once, and stopped. "He's dead!" Behind them, the door slammed. Oris spun and caught it before the old latch dropped. Bastion stared at the body, then at Ione. "We saw him," he said. Above them, the hotel groaned under the storm. "We saw his coat," Ione answered. The police station in Gannet's End consisted of 2 rooms above the harbor office. The storm had cut the coast road and grounded the rescue helicopter, leaving Inspector Niall Rook as the senior officer on site until morning. Rook arrived at Northlight House at 9:10 with a constable, a forensic kit, and the expression of a man who had been handed a locked box during a flood. He was in his early 50s, broad through the chest, with rain flattened against his close-cropped hair. He sealed Sablecut, ordered the hotel doors locked, and confiscated Kit's camera before Kit could object. Then he looked at the 9 people in the ballroom. Until the road opens, no one leaves. No one deletes a message, washes clothing, or enters a private room without permission. Dr. Knoll will assist me with the initial examination. Miss Mercer, you recorded part of the evening? Some of it. I'll need the files. You'll get copies. Rook studied her. Still a journalist. Still evidence. A corner of his mouth moved. Copies, then. He began with ordinary facts. Karis estimated that Leander had died between 7:30 and 8:10, allowing for the cold in the lower passage. There was no sign that the tide itself had killed him. His head injury was inconsistent with a simple fall on the broad stone slope. He had probably been struck elsewhere or positioned after the fatal blow. The precise time would require a full post-mortem when the road reopened. The sighting at 8:25 therefore mattered. If it had been Leander, Karis's estimate was wrong. If Karis was right, someone had crossed the gallery in his coat. Rook placed a sheet of hotel stationery on the table and drew a rough plan. The red oilskin? He asked. Tressa answered. Usually hung in the old boot room beside the service stair. Mr. Fane wore it whenever cameras were present. He liked the color. When did you last see it? This afternoon. The hat? Same room. The cane was with the body, but witnesses saw a cane in the gallery. Rook looked around the table. So either Mr. Fane carried 2, or someone used another object at a distance. Kit lifted a hand. There are walking sticks in the hotel display cases. There were, Tressa said. The ebony signal cane was removed for cleaning this week. By whom? Tressa hesitated. Me. Rook wrote her name. The generator hummed beneath the floor. Rain struck the windows like handfuls of gravel. Ione listened as the first statements formed. Celestine admitted arguing with Leander over the cliff surveys. She had been in the map room during the blackout, alone. Her motive was obvious. Stop the expansion before the unstable Eastern Foundation failed. Her secret emerged when Rook searched her folder and found a draft injunction she intended to file against her husband the next morning. Bastion admitted the argument about the Morrow Bay sinking. He had been on a harbor call from 7:52 until 8:11, confirmed by a genuine radio log and 3 fishermen. During the blackout, he had entered the outer yard to check the surge gate. He could have reached the tower door, though he denied doing so. His secret was worse than anger. For years, he had taken cash from Leander to keep quiet about missing inspection records. Oris said he had secured a shutter, then gone to the lower stores to retrieve rope. The dark mark on his cuff was machine grease. In his room, Rook found photographs of a protected wreck beyond Lantern Head and a letter threatening to expose Leander for arranging an illegal salvage claim. Oris claimed the letter was leverage, not intent. Kit had camera footage proving he was with Ione during the blackout and in the gallery when the red-coated figure appeared. His secret sat on the camera's memory card. Weeks of stolen footage from Leander's office, including images of passwords, letters, and financial documents. Kit had also discovered that his inheritance had been replaced by a modest trust. Karis said she had been in the library reading a letter from Leander. She handed it to Rook. The letter accused her of misusing clinic funds and threatened to withdraw support unless she signed a medical statement declaring the Lantern Wing safe for guests. Karis had refused. Her secret was that she had once altered a date in a clinic ledger to protect a patient from an abusive husband. Leander had learned of it and used it to control her. Tressa said she had been in the kitchen during most of the blackout, then in the ballroom counting guests. 3 staff members confirmed parts of her account, but none could place her continuously. Her secret emerged from the hotel accounts. She had diverted small amounts from room charges into an unofficial staff emergency fund. Leander had discovered it that morning. With the hotel sold, she expected dismissal and possible prosecution. Sabine Kestrel waited until last. I was in the ballroom when the lights failed, she said. I remained near the table. Alone? Rook asked. For perhaps 2 minutes. Then Tressa came in. Karis followed. Ione remembered Sabine seated when the emergency lamps came on, breathing hard. Rook asked about the renewal trust. Sabine folded her hands. I am council liaison. Leander chaired it. The accounts are audited. Then what clarification was he planning tomorrow? I don't know. Leander's leather document case was missing. Rook searched the ballroom, chart room, map room, library, offices, and suites. At 10:30, the case was found in the old chart room beneath a table, empty except for a torn envelope and grains of pale sand. On the floor nearby lay a brass-sounding weight from a maritime display, shaped like a long teardrop and heavy enough to pull a line through deep water. Its polished surface looked recently wiped. Karis examined it without touching. The shape could be consistent. Rook photographed the weight and sealed it. A smear of red paint marked the edge of the chart table. Tressa stared at it. The oilskin has brass snaps painted red. One was loose. In the corner, behind a cabinet, Ione found a small triangle of black rubber. It looked like the tip of a repaired boot sole. Rook bagged that too. By 11, the storm had cut the telephone line. The hotel was now an island above an island, full of people who had each imagined Leander Fane gone and were only shocked that someone had made the imagination real. Rook assigned rooms and posted the constable in the hall. Ione should have slept. Instead, she sat in the small recording room with headphones on, listening to the evening. Audio did not remember faces. It remembered pressure, distance, breath. She heard Leander tap his cane before the announcement. Left side, slightly ahead of the footfall. Tap step, tap step. Then a faint pause after every third movement when his injured ribs forced him to settle his balance. She played the gallery recording from Kit's camera. Wind roared against the glass. Tressa said, "Mr. Fane." Someone inhaled sharply. In the distance came the hard rhythm of a cane. Tap step, tap step, tap step. No pause. And the taps fell on the right. Ione replayed it. The figure had carried the cane in the wrong hand. At midnight, she knocked on Rook's door. He opened it wearing shirt sleeves and suspicion. "I have something," she said. "So does everyone in this hotel, usually after midnight." She held up the headphones. "This one can be replayed." Rook listened twice. Then he looked toward the dark corridor leading to the lantern gallery. "Not Leander," he said. "Not unless death cured his ribs." Rook took the headphones off slowly. 6 suspects, 1 red coat, 1 empty case. 7 motives, Ione said. "What is the 7th? She thought of the original maintenance report and her father's name. Whatever Leander thought, he could still sell after he was dead. By morning, the storm had become a wall. Gray light seeped into the ballroom, but the sea remained black. Waves struck the outer defenses and threw spray above the second-floor windows. The road below the village had disappeared under water and stone. No laboratory team could reach Northlight House. No one could leave. Inspector Rook turned the hotel into a map of restrictions. The chart room was sealed, Sable Cut was locked, the lantern gallery remained open only under supervision because it was the one route to the tower generator. The guests were permitted breakfast in silence. Silence did not survive the coffee. Kit accused Tressa of hiding Leander's coat. Oris accused Kit of filming the body before Rook took his camera. Celestine accused everyone of treating the storm as background scenery while the eastern cliff moved beneath them. Bastion stood at the window, listening to harbor radio traffic through a portable set. Karis watched Sabine with the alert stillness of a doctor who had noticed a symptom. Sabine's turn pin was gone. Ione noticed the absence because Sabine kept touching the place where it had been. "Lost something?" Ione asked. Sabine lowered her hand. The clasp was loose. "When did it fall?" "I don't know." "Before or after the blackout?" Sabine's eyes sharpened. "Is this an interview?" "Not yet." "Then don't waste your best questions." Rook entered carrying a clear evidence bag. Inside was the ebony signal cane from the hotel display. It had been found in a laundry cupboard near the bottom of the service stair. Tressa stared at it. "I put that in the restoration closet 3 days ago." "You removed it for cleaning," Rook said. "Yes." "You also controlled the boot room, where the red oilskin and hat were kept." "Yes." "And your work shoes have a triangular repair on the sole." Every face turned toward her feet. Tressa wore black lace-up shoes. On the outer edge of the left sole, a cobbler had inserted a small triangular piece of rubber. Rook placed a second evidence bag beside the cane. The fragment from the chart room fit the repair almost perfectly. Tressa's composure finally broke. "That piece came loose last week." "In the chart room?" "I don't know. The wet print in the lantern gallery was narrow, consistent with your shoe size." "So are half the shoes in this hotel." "You had access to the disguise. the replacement cane, the service stair, and the lower passage. Leander was selling the hotel. He knew about the money you diverted. It was for the staff. It was still taken. Tressa stood so abruptly, her chair fell. I did not kill him. The hotel seemed to hold the sound. Rook did not raise his voice. Where were you between 7:45 and 8:15? Everywhere. The kitchen, the office, the generator room, the ballroom. Which means nowhere continuously. Tressa looked at Ione. You heard the figure. You said the cane was in the wrong hand. That proves it wasn't Leander, Ione said. Not who it was. Tressa's face closed. Rook asked the constable to escort her to the manager's office and remain outside. It was not an arrest, he said. Not yet. At 9:15, the tide began to retreat. Karis completed a second examination of Leander with what equipment she had. The body had cooled more than the chamber alone explained, and stiffness had begun before they found him. Her revised estimate placed death most likely between 7:40 and 8, though she emphasized that it remained an estimate. The figure at 8:25 was not him, she said. I would say that even without the medical evidence. Why? Rook asked. His right shoulder. Celestine looked up. Karis continued. The sailing accident damaged more than his ribs. He could not raise his right arm above chest height without severe pain. Ione remembered the red figure lifting its right arm in a clear wave. Celestine's expression changed from grief to concentration. He also wore the cane on the left because the right shoulder couldn't bear the angle. The person in the gallery carried it on the right, Ione said. Rook drew a line through Leander's name on the gallery sighting. It was the first true turn in the case. Until then, they had been asking how a dead man crossed the glass passage. Now they had to ask who had wanted to be mistaken for him, and why every witness had completed the disguise in their own mind. Rook questioned them again, this time about clothing, posture, and access. Celestine had worn flat gray shoes and was slightly taller than Leander. Bastian was broader and had been outside in yellow waterproofs. Oris was the closest to Leander's build, but much younger and moved with the loose balance of a sailor. Kit was on camera beside Ione. Karis was too short. Tressa and Sabine were both close enough in height to pass at a distance beneath the long coat and hat. Tressa had the boot repair. Sabine had rescue training and knew every service route in Northlight House from emergency drills. When Rook asked whether she could have moved a body, Sabine did not flinch. Yes, she said. So could Bastian. So could Oris. Tressa moves furniture without asking for help. Celestine spent 30 years on survey boats. Strength is not a confession. What about the gallery? I crossed it before dinner. In the storm? It was raining, not collapsing. What shoes were you wearing? These. She extended one boot. The soles were patterned, wet at the edges, with no obvious triangular repair. Ione noticed pale grit caught in the stitching around the heel. Not beach sand, the grains were too light, almost white. The same color as the sand in Leander's empty case. Rook noticed Ione noticing. Sabine drew her foot back. Council offices use shell grit at the entrance, she said. Half the village does in winter. Northlight House doesn't, Tressa said from the doorway. The constable had allowed her to bring a ledger. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady again. We use dark quarry grit. Shell scratches the tiles. Rook took the ledger and sent her back. Ione asked where shell grit was stored in the hotel. Tressa answered without turning. Emergency flood bags. Lantern Tower. Sabine said nothing. The leather case had been in the tower, then, or near someone who had been. At 10, Rook permitted Ione to listen to Kit's confiscated footage in his presence. The camera had captured fragments of the evening. Celestine unfolding cliff maps, Oris threatening to throw the camera into the tide, Bastian entering through the harbor door, Tressa carrying glasses, Leander tapping his cane, Sabine standing beside the stage with the silver turn pin on her dress. Then the blackout. The footage became sound and movement, Kit's breath, Ione telling him to stay still, a beam from his camera light cutting through the gallery, Oris in the service doorway, the generator starting. At 8:17, Kit filmed the ballroom while Tressa counted guests. Sabine was visible at the far end of the table. At 8:19, Kit turned toward the windows as lightning flashed. At 8:20, Sabine's chair was empty. No one remarked upon it. The search had begun. Celestine was opening doors. Bastian was checking the outer hall. Karis was calling Leander's name. Tressa was moving toward the gallery. At 8:25, the red figure appeared. The recording showed Sabine again at 8:32, standing near the fireplace without her turn pin. 7 minutes. Enough to cross the gallery, descend the service stair, and re-enter the ballroom through the kitchen corridor if one knew the route. Rook paused the footage. Where did she say she was? Near the table. She was. Then she wasn't. Being absent 7 minutes isn't murder. No, lying about it may be fear, embarrassment, or habit. Ione leaned closer to the screen. The red figure's movement was blurred by water and reflected light. The coat concealed the body, the hat concealed the head, the cane supplied the final word in a sentence the witnesses had already decided to read. But the figure's right hand rose in a wave. Something flashed near the wrist. Go back. Rook replayed the second. A brief silver spark appeared beneath the sleeve, then vanished. A watch? He asked. Maybe. Sabine had worn no watch at dinner. Tressa had. The image favored the wrong suspect again. At 11, the storm loosened a section of guttering above the east wing. The crash shook dust from the ceiling. Celestine demanded that everyone move to the western rooms. The foundation readings were taken in calm weather, she said. The surge is striking below the lantern wing. If the old retaining wall shifts, the gallery becomes a lever. Leander had known the risk. He had kept 30 people away from the memorial dinner under the excuse of exclusivity, yet invited the 6 people he meant to control. Ione wondered whether he had expected danger from the storm or from the table. While staff moved furniture, she found Bastian alone in the harbor office with the radio pressed to his ear. Lower quay flooded, he said. No injuries, 3 boats broke moorings. Sabine used to work rescue with you. Before council. Was she good? The best. Strong enough to move Leander? Bastian turned down the radio. You already know the answer. I want yours. She could carry a grown man over shingle, but if Sabine killed Leander, it wasn't because she lost her temper. Why? She never wastes movement. That was not a defense. It was a warning. Ione asked about the shell grit. Flood bags in the tower are filled with crushed shell, Bastian said. Lighter to carry than quarry sand. Sabine ordered them years ago. Who has tower keys? Tressa, Leander, Sabine for emergency access, me, and probably Kit because locks treat him like a suggestion. Did Leander keep trust documents there? No, too damp. What would he keep there? Bastian looked toward the old portraits, things he wanted found in dramatic circumstances. At noon, the constable discovered the red oilskin. It had been pushed behind sacks in the boiler room, bundled around the dark hat. One brass snap was missing. The right cuff was torn and repaired with blue wax thread. The coat smelled of smoke, salt, and the sharp citrus polish used on the hotel's brass rails. Rook laid it on a clean sheet in the ballroom. Tressa identified the repair immediately. I mended that cuff yesterday, she said. The proper red thread was finished. With thread from where? The sail repair box in my office. Who can access it? Any member of staff. Rook examined the lining. Near the collar was a fresh puncture no wider than a pin. Sabine watched from the doorway. Her hand rose again to the empty place on her dress. Rook asked her to surrender the turn pin if she found it. I told you I lost it. Where? I don't know. The silver flash on Kit's footage might not have been a watch. It might have been a pin caught at the figure's wrist after tearing free from the dress. But the coat contained no pin. The boiler room did contain another problem. Behind the sacks, the constable found a hotel payroll envelope holding £4,000 in cash. Tressa admitted it belonged to the unofficial staff fund. Rook's patience with coincidence ended. He formally cautioned Tressa and confined her to the manager's office while he prepared an arrest request over radio. Tressa did not cry. She looked at Ione through the open doorway and said, Ask why I would put my own shoe beneath the chart room table. People make mistakes, Rook said. Yes, usually when someone has arranged them. The door closed. Ione walked the lantern gallery with Rook just after 1. The storm had weakened enough to reveal the courtyard below. The tower end of the gallery smelled of wet iron. On the floor, chalk marks outlined the narrow boot print. The print faced toward the hotel. Ione stood where the witnesses had seen the figure. To look like Leander, the killer needed the coat, hat, and cane, she said. But not his shoes. No one could see them through the gallery rail. So the print may identify the wearer. Or it was left earlier. Rook crouched. It was wet when you found it. The gallery leaks in 3 places. A dry old print could become wet from above. He looked up. A narrow line of water fell from a faulty seal directly onto the chalked area. The print had not necessarily been made during the sighting. Tressa's strongest physical link weakened. At the tower, they found 3 flood bags split open. Pale shell grit spread across the floor. A rectangular, clean patch on a dusty shelf matched the base of Leander's leather case. The case had been placed there recently. Beside the shelf, something had scratched the paint from the wall, a curved red mark at shoulder height. The oilskin's loose snap. Ione stepped into the coat in her imagination. The wearer had entered the tower, collected or hidden the case, pulled on the red oilskin, caught the snap against the wall, and crossed the gallery. "Why bring the case here?" she asked. "To remove something before it was found," Rook said. "Then leave the empty case in the chart room to make us think the theft happened with the killing." "Possible. What was taken?" "Trust accounts. Your father's report. Blackmail material. Choose a grievance." A sound came from the stair below. Not a footstep. A soft scrape, followed by the closing of a door. Rook moved first. He descended 2 flights and found the lower tower exit swinging on its hinge. Outside, rain whipped across the narrow service yard. No one was visible. On the landing, Ione found a small silver object under the rail. The turn pin. One wing was bent. A strand of red-coated fabric clung to the clasp. Rook sealed it in a bag. Sabine Kestrel was no longer merely absent for 7 minutes. Her pin had been in the tower, where the disguise began. When confronted, Sabine did not deny the pin was hers. "I crossed the gallery before dinner," she said. "It could have fallen then." "You were wearing it in Kit's footage after dinner," Ione said. Sabine looked at Kit with open contempt. "Of course he filmed it." "The clasp has red fiber," Rook said. "So does every chair in the ballroom." "The fiber is coated fabric." Sabine's jaw tightened. Rook asked her to hand over her phone and remain in the library. She complied. For the first time, fear moved visibly across her face. At 2, the Coast Guard relayed a message that the road might reopen by evening. The news changed the atmosphere. Until then, the murderer had been trapped with them. Now, escape had a horizon. Kit asked to speak privately with Ione. He took her to the small projection room beside the ballroom, where old reels of Northlight House ceremonies were stored in metal tins. "I copied more than financial pages," he said. "I found a video Leander recorded for the Coastal Commission." "On your camera?" "No, on a memory card in his desk. I made a duplicate and hid it." "Why didn't you tell Rook?" "Because Leander discussed my debts and called me unstable. I thought it made me look worse." "Where is the duplicate?" Kit lifted an empty film tin from the shelf. "It was here." The tin contained only a square of black foam and a smear of pale shell grit. Someone had searched the projection room after visiting the tower. "What was on the recording?" Ione asked. Leander said irregularities had been discovered in the renewal trust. He said one official had redirected funds without his knowledge. "Which official?" "He didn't name her, but he used the phrase council authorization." Sabine: "Probably. Did he sound truthful?" Kit laughed once. He sounded rehearsed. Ione asked if Kit had seen the underlying records. "Some. Transfers from the Lower Harbor Defense Project to emergency stabilization at Northlight House. Both Leander and Sabine approved them." Then his recording was a shield. He meant to blame her and keep the hotel. But he announced he was selling it. After public money reinforced the cliff, the property became worth twice as much. The motive sharpened. Sabine had helped divert money from the village to Leander's private foundation works. Whether she had done it willingly, under pressure, or in the belief that the hotel kept Gannet's end alive, Leander planned to leave her holding the crime. Ione took the empty tin to Rook. They found the projection room lock undamaged. Tressa had a key. Leander had one. So did Sabine, because the room doubled as secure storage during council events. Again, every door opened for more than one suspect. At 3:10, smoke entered the western corridor. The fire began in the archive room. An alarm clanged. Tressa shouted instructions from behind the manager's office door until the constable released her. Staff carried extinguishers. Bastion and Oris unrolled a hose from the service cabinet. Celestine moved guests away from the east wing. Sabine came from the library coughing, one hand over her mouth. The fire was contained within minutes, but water and foam ruined shelves of trust records, hotel ledgers, and old inquiry files. The memory card was not found. Neither was the original Morro Bay maintenance report. Rook searched everyone. Sabine had no lighter or matches. Tressa carried a master key. Oris smelled of fuel from the generator. Kit had been in the corridor moments before the alarm. Bastian knew the building's fire system. Carries had access to medical alcohol. Celestine's survey bag contained a box of stormproof matches. The archive fire gave the case back all 6 suspects. Worse, the fire alarm had opened every security door in the hotel. During the confusion, someone entered the chart room and removed the sealed evidence bag containing the brass-sounding weight. The probable murder weapon was gone. Rook's face hardened as he stared at the cut police seal. "This was planned," he said. "Before the fire?" Ione asked. "Or by someone who understands how panic moves people." He ordered the hotel searched again. The sounding weight was not found. By 4, Rook had a body, a disguise, a missing weapon, destroyed records, and evidence pointing in mutually exclusive directions. Tressa had the boot fragment and access. Sabine had the pin and shell grit. Oris had knowledge of sable cut and grease on his clothing. Kit had stolen files. Celestine had matches and a legal war with the victim. Bastian had confessed to years of bribery. Karis had been blackmailed. Then the harbor radio delivered a message from the regional prosecutor. Based on the physical evidence available, Rook was authorized to arrest Tressa Lorne on suspicion of murder. Tressa listened without expression. When the constable fastened the cuffs, she said to Ione, "The figure waved." "I know." "No, you don't." Tressa glanced toward the red oilskin, now sealed in plastic. "Mr. Fane never waved at staff, not once. Whoever wore that coat wasn't imitating him. They were making sure we looked." Rook took her to the harbor office to await transport when the road opened. The apparent solution should have settled the hotel. Instead, it made Ione certain they were wrong. Tressa had concealed money, moved the display cane, and repaired the coat. She had left a piece of her shoe in the chart room. It was enough evidence to build a case, and too much to build a believable act. A careful manager did not plant her own belongings around a murder unless she wanted to be caught. Someone else wanted Tressa to be caught. Ione returned to the chart room. The police seal hung cut from the door. Smoke from the archive lingered in the air. The brass-sounding weight had rested near the table. The red paint smear marked the table edge. The rubber fragment had been behind a cabinet. She crouched and looked at the floor from the height of the evidence. Tressa's shoe repair was on the left sole. The wet gallery print had shown the right foot. Rook had photographed it. Ione enlarged the image on his tablet. The triangular gap lay on the outer edge of the right heel, not the left forefoot where Tressa's repair had failed. The rubber fragment fit her shoe because it had come from her shoe, but the gallery print had not. Someone had taken the loose fragment and planted it in the chart room while wearing different shoes. Sabine's black boots had no patch, but the outer corner of the right heel was worn into a triangular notch. Ione had seen it when Sabine extended her foot. The print in the gallery belonged to Sabine. She found Rook in the archive, lifting soaked files from the floor. Tressa's fragment and the gallery print are from opposite feet, Ione said. He stopped. She showed him the photograph. Rook swore softly. The print was described too quickly. I let the fragment tell me what I expected. That's what the redcoat did to all of us. They went to the library. Sabine was gone. The constable outside said she had asked to use the lavatory during the fire search and never returned. One service door stood ajar. Rook called Bastian over radio and ordered every exterior exit covered. Ione looked toward the lantern tower, the old projection tins, the shell grit, the missing memory card, the original report Leander had promised her, things he wanted found in dramatic circumstances, Bastian had said. Leander had staged public revelations. He would not hide his strongest evidence in an ordinary safe. He had planned to speak in the ballroom beneath the brass ship's bell. Ione crossed to the stage and lifted the bell. Its wooden base felt too heavy. Beneath the felt lining was a shallow compartment. Inside lay a folded maintenance report in a sealed plastic sleeve and a small memory card. Leander had hidden both within reach of the microphone, ready to produce them when they would hurt most. Rook read the first page of the report. It confirmed that Ione's father had reported the navigation fault before the Morro Bay vessel sailed. Leander, then a junior director of the harbor company, had signed the decision to proceed after repairs were delayed. The memory card contained Leander's rehearsed statement to the Coastal Commission and scanned accounts showing the diversion of defense funds. The authorization carried both Leander's signature and Sabine's secure counsel code. At the end was a draft letter accusing Sabine of acting alone. She killed him for this, Rook said. Maybe. Her pin, her print, her motive, and the coat. A gust struck the hotel. The lantern gallery lights flickered. From the tower came the low mechanical thud of the emergency door closing. Sabine was there. Rook ordered Ione to remain in the ballroom. She followed him as far as the gallery anyway. The storm had thinned to hard rain, but wind still flexed the glass panes. At the far end, the tower door stood open. Shell grit blew across the floor in pale lines. Rook entered first. The lower room was empty. A service hatch banged above them. Sabine had climbed to the lantern chamber. They found her beside the old signal lens, holding the missing brass-sounding weight in one hand and Kit's memory card in the other. Her navy dress was stained with archive soot. The right heel of her boot showed the triangular wear clearly. She looked tired rather than trapped. I wondered how long the bell would keep his secret, she said. Rook raised one hand. Put the weight down. Sabine set it carefully on the floor. Leander always loved an audience, she said. Even his hiding places had timing. Ione remained by the stairs. Not timing. Control. Sabine looked at her. Your father understood that too late. You knew what was in the report. I knew Leander had it. I didn't know where. You searched the tower because he used it for his theater. Then the projection room. Then you burned the archive. I burned copies of lies. And nearly burned the hotel. The fire was contained. You were certain it would be, Rook said. Rescue training. Sabine gave him a faint, humorless smile. Everyone here has turned my competence into evidence. The evidence is your pin, your boot print, and the trust accounts. The accounts prove theft, not murder. The coat proves you were in the tower. I crossed before dinner. Kit filmed the pin on your dress after dinner, Ione said. It tore free inside the red oilskin. You found it later on the tower landing and tried to retrieve it, but we heard you leave. Sabine's gaze shifted. Ione continued, You carried the display cane in your right hand because that was natural for you. You walked without Leander's third-step pause. You waved with the arm he could not raise. You weren't trying to perform him perfectly. You only needed the coat, hat, and cane to make us name him for you. People see what they expect, Sabine said. Yes. And they call that truth? Rook stepped closer. Tell us what happened in the chart room. For several seconds, only the signal lens moved, nudged by wind through a cracked pane. Its glass threw pale arcs around the walls. Sabine looked at the sounding weight. He asked me to meet him at 7:45, she said. He showed me the draft accusation. He said the commission would believe him because the hotel accounts had been arranged to make the council code look like the first authorization. You both diverted the money, Ione said. Yes. Why? Because the Eastern Cliff was failing. If Northlight House closed, 80 people lost work immediately. The harbor lost winter trade. The clinic lost his money. Shops followed. Leander said we would borrow from the lower defense project and replace it after the sale. But he never meant to replace it. No, he meant to sell the reinforced property and leave. When the audit began, he prepared me as the answer. Sabine's voice remained level, but her hands had begun to shake. I told him I would expose both of us. He showed me the Morro Bay report. He said he would release it with a story that my father had suppressed it while serving on the old council. Another dead man to carry another living man's guilt. What did you do? Rook asked. He turned away. He said I had until morning to decide whether I wanted prison or obedience. Her eyes closed once. The sounding weight was on the table. I picked it up. I told him to stop. He laughed. She did not describe the blow. She did not need to. When he fell, Sabine continued, I understood that everything he had built would become evidence against whoever stood nearest. I moved him through the service route to Sable Cut. The storm covered the noise. I put his cane beside him and made the chamber look like the end of an argument with the sea. The red coat? Ione asked. I needed the search to move away from the chart room. I needed everyone to believe he had been alive after the blackout, after I was seen in the ballroom. There it was, not a false clock, not an altered record, but a physical performance built from distance and expectation. You knew the gallery lights would turn you into a silhouette, Ione said. I designed the emergency drills. I knew where people would stand, which doors Tressa would open, how long the service stair took. I took the display cane because his real one was with the body. I wore the coat and hat. I crossed once. I waved so no one would look away. Then you returned to the ballroom, through the kitchen stair, and hid the coat in the boiler room with Tressa's cash. I knew about her fund. Leander knew too. I put the rubber from her shoe in the chart room and the coat beside the money. I thought it would be enough. It nearly was, Rook said. Sabine looked at Ione. Would you rather I had let him destroy the village? You didn't save the village. I saved the hotel. You saved the version of Gannet's End that made your choices look necessary. The words struck harder than Ione expected. Sabine's face changed, not with anger, but recognition. Below them, a deep crack traveled through the cliff. The tower shuddered. Celestine's voice came over Rook's radio. The eastern retaining wall has shifted. Get out of the lantern wing, now. Rook moved toward Sabine. We leave together. Sabine backed toward the service stair on the opposite side. Don't, he said. I know this tower. So does the storm. The floor lurched. The sounding weight rolled and struck the base of the lens. Glass trembled overhead. Sabine turned toward the service stair, but the door had jammed in its frame. Ione crossed the room, seized the manual release lever, and pulled. It did not move. Sabine joined her without being asked. Together, they forced the lever down. The door opened with a blast of rain. Rook guided them into the main stairwell. They descended as the tower groaned behind them. Halfway down, a pane shattered in the lantern chamber, the sound sharp and brief. They reached the gallery. Sabine stopped at the threshold. The passage stretched before them, bright and exposed over the courtyard. It was the same stage she had used the night before. This time, there was no red coat, no hat, no borrowed cane, only Sabine Kestrel in a soot-marked dress, seen clearly by everyone waiting at the far end. She crossed without disguise. Rook arrested her in the ballroom. The road reopened shortly after 6 that evening. Regional officers arrived with forensic staff, and the ordinary machinery of an investigation replaced the improvised work of the storm. Measurements were taken, devices were sealed. Statements were recorded again in rooms that no longer felt outside the world. The post-mortem confirmed Karis's estimate. Leander had died before the gallery sighting. Trace material on the sounding weight matched the chart room. Fibers from the red oilskin were caught in Sabine's turn pin. Shell grit from the tower was embedded in the seams of her boots and inside the leather document case. The right heel pattern matched the wet gallery print. Kit's footage and Ione's audio supplied what the physical evidence alone could not: the wrong-handed cane, the missing third-step pause, the impossible right arm wave, and Sabine's 7-minute absence. Tressa was released before midnight. She returned to Northlight House long enough to dismiss 2 reporters, reorganize the staff rota, and tell the new owners, through their solicitor, that the hotel would remain closed until Celestine declared the cliff safe. You were nearly charged with murder, Ione said. Tressa adjusted a stack of evacuation forms, which is not a reason to lower standards. Oris surrendered the protected wreck coordinates to the Maritime Authority and admitted his illegal dives. Bastion gave a full statement about the bribes and the missing inspection records. Karis reported Leander's attempted coercion to the medical board before anyone else could use it against her. Kit released no footage from inside Sable Cut. For once, he understood that withholding an image could be more honest than publishing it. Celestine's surveys proved the lantern wing unsafe. The tower and gallery were closed, and emergency work began before the next spring tide. The renewal trust accounts led to charges beyond Sabine's murder case. Public money was traced, assets were frozen, and the planned hotel sale collapsed. The Lower Harbor Defense Project was restored under independent supervision. None of it saved Sabine from what she had done. None of it made Leander innocent. 3 months later, Ione returned to Gannet's End with a finished recording. She sat with her mother in the front room of the house above the harbor. Rain tapped gently at the window, ordinary rain this time. On the table lay the original Morro Bay maintenance report, released by the Regional Inquiry. Her father's warning appeared in 3 places, signed and dated, followed by Leander Fane's authorization to sail. The inquiry issued a formal correction. Newspapers used the word exonerated. The harbor board restored her father's name to the memorial wall. Ione expected relief to feel larger. Instead, it felt precise, a tight knot loosening one thread at a time. Her mother listened to the final audio through old headphones. The program did not make Leander a monster or Sabine a martyr. It told the harder truth. A town could be harmed by the person who claimed to own its survival and by the person who believed only she could protect it. At the end, Ione included the sound of the figure crossing the lantern gallery. Tap step, tap step, tap step. Then Leander's true rhythm from earlier that night. Tap step, pause. Her mother removed the headphones. That is such a small difference, she said. Most disguises are. Outside, workers were removing the Northlight House sign from the cliff road. The hotel would reopen one day under another name, if the land held and the village agreed. The red oilskin remained in police evidence, stripped of the certainty people had given it. Ione looked across the harbor toward Lantern Head. On the night of the murder, 9 people had seen the same figure. Every one of them had told the truth about what they believed. That had been the murderer's strongest weapon. Not darkness, not the storm. Recognition. Thank you for listening to the Unwritten Murder Files. If you enjoyed this mystery, please like the episode, subscribe to the channel, and share it with another listener who loves a clever case. Your support helps us bring you more original, full-length mysteries. We'll be back next week with another case from the Unwritten Murder Files.